Let's talk about Marie Curie, but this isn't going to be your average history lesson. Her story is really about a discovery that held the power to both save humanity and, well, destroy it. It's a massive paradox, all wrapped up in the life of one incredible person. Let's get into it.
So right off the bat, here's the central conflict of her work. On one side, you have this amazing new power, a potential cure for cancer, and on the other, an invisible poison, a silent killer with no cure. Talk about a contradiction. And Marie Curie's life and her legacy, they just perfectly capture this intense duality. Her work wasn't just some big shift in science. It's this timeless story about the tricky dance between innovation and all its unintended consequences. So where did this all begin? How did this young woman, who would literally change the world, even get her start? Well, her journey began against a backdrop of some pretty huge barriers, which honestly just makes what she accomplished all the more remarkable.
I mean, her determination was just off the charts. She's in Russian-occupied Poland, right? Women weren't allowed to get a higher education. So what does she do? She attends a secret underground university. Then she makes this pact with her sister, working for years as a governess to pay for her sister's medical school, all on the promise that her sister would do the same for her later. And when she finally makes it to Paris, to the Sorbonne, she doesn't just get by. She graduates at the top of her class before meeting Pierre Curie and forming one of the most famous partnerships in the history of science.
Okay, so it's time for her doctorate, and she has to pick a topic to research. She gets completely captivated by the work of a guy named Henri Becquerel, who noticed these mysterious, invisible rays coming off of uranium. That choice, well, it put her right at the very beginning of a scientific revolution.
She even came up with the name for it, radioactivity. Now, you have to remember, at the time, everyone thought atoms were the smallest possible thing, totally indivisible. Curie's work suggested that actually, atoms had an internal structure and could just spontaneously shoot out huge amounts of energy. It was a radical, world-changing idea.
And her method was just so brilliant and logical. First, she meticulously measured these rays. That led her to a key hypothesis. This radiation was a property of the atom itself. But then came the big moment. She found that pitchblende, an ore with uranium in it, was way more radioactive than the amount of uranium could explain. The only logical conclusion? There had to be something else in that ore. Something totally unknown and incredibly powerful.
So after what can only be described as a heroic effort, they were processing tons of ore by hand in a dilapidated shed, the Curies managed to isolate not just one, but two new elements.
The first one they named polonium, as a tribute to Marie's homeland. The second they called radium, from the Latin word for ray, because of just how intensely radioactive it was. And that name was about to become famous all over the world.
And let's just pause on that for a moment. Radium's radioactivity wasn't just a little stronger than uranium's. It was millions of times greater. This discovery didn't just add a new chapter to the book of physics, it forced a complete rewrite of the whole thing.
So, they've just unleashed this incredible new force upon the world. And now we get to see how that discovery immediately became both a gift and a curse, the double-edged sword itself.
First, let's look at the gift, the benevolent blade. The immediate life-saving uses for this stuff were nothing short of a miracle.
All of a sudden, the radiation from radium became a revolutionary new treatment for cancer, what they called Curie therapy. And during World War I, Marie herself designed and drove these mobile X-ray vans, the Petites Curies, right to the front lines. They helped surgeons find shrapnel in wounded soldiers and probably saved about 1 million lives. And soon after, radioactive tracers gave doctors a way to see inside the human body like never before. It was an absolute golden age for medical breakthroughs.
But with all of that incredible good came the curse, the perilous shadow. The dangers of radioactivity were sneaky, invisible, and just utterly devastating.
Marie Curie herself suffered her entire life from radiation exposure, and it's what ultimately killed her. Then you have the absolutely tragic story of the Radium Girls, young factory workers who painted glow-in-the-dark watch dials. They were told the radium paint was harmless and even encouraged to lick their brushes to a fine point. They died from horrific, disfiguring bone cancers. And of course, the very same science that powered those X-ray machines would eventually lead to the atomic bomb.
And this danger isn't just some historical fact. A century later, right now, the very notebooks she filled with her revolutionary ideas are still too dangerous to handle without protection. That's the enduring power and peril that she unleashed.
So what's the big takeaway from this complex, paradoxical story? It's a timeless lesson, really.
about the nature of discovery and the huge responsibility that comes along with it.
This table just lays it out so perfectly, how that duality plays out across so many fields. In medicine, yeah, you get cancer therapy, but you also risk radiation sickness. In energy, you get carbon-neutral power, but you also get the threat of nuclear accidents. In every single application, this tension between promise and peril is always there. Curie's discovery wasn't just about radium. It was about this fundamental trade-off in human progress.
And in the end, Marie Curie's story leaves us with this massive, enduring question. It was relevant in her time with radioactivity, and it's just as relevant today with things like AI, genetic engineering, and whatever comes next. It's a challenge that we all have to face. How do we balance that relentless pursuit of knowledge with the wisdom to manage what we find?